thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and student activities.
All the factors are useful.
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. and Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, at the top of the hour, let me thank you for your thoughtful calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, but particularly your great ideas for topics and guests and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your public affairs, community affairs show here on HCC TV, proudly starting our 29th season this January. It has been a pleasure to be with you all these years and to bring you these top quality programs and guests. We're going to continue to do so in 2021. We have a lot to talk about in 2021. We're going to leave 2020 behind. We're going to say goodbye 2020 and all that have gone with that and start with new hope, new life, new resurrection, new grace, new purpose going forward in 2021 and focus back on what does it mean for our common humanity? What does it mean to be in relationship with other human beings? What does it mean to understand how we are all in this together as we shape our collective future going forward? My guest is a young man, even though he's young, and young is relative, just like old is relative, as I'm getting older every year, is someone who can help us kind of see that understanding and perspective from this particular vantage point of his age at this point and his wisdom, I might add also. So I'm very glad to have him join us. And it is none other than Jeremiah Pearcey, and he will tell us all about himself. And then we're going to enter into this dialogue with him. So before we do anything else, I'm going to stop there and say, welcome, Jeremiah. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate the invitation onto your show, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
You are new in so many ways. I don't know where to start. So why don't you just tell us all about yourself a little bit and give us a great context?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm new to Houston. I moved here at the beginning of the year, just in time for the pandemic to hit. I'm moving from Washington, D.C., and I came here for a couple different job opportunities. I've been working with, as you know, the Institute for Spirituality and Health, and just really kind of helping them sort out a couple programs and just really give my insight and expertise, which kind of goes back to who I am. So I'm first and foremost a doctor of psychology. I've been studying psychology, and I really wanted to understand stress. So, a lot of what I do relates to stress and how stress affects us in different ways. And, I even go so far as to investigate how spirituality and mysticism can impact your stress response. So that's kind of what I do, and that's my area of expertise. But I'm also a writer. I've been working on a kid's book, as you know, and I really started working on this kid's book due to earlier this year when the Black Lives Matter movement really started to kick off. And I have two young children, one's 3 and one's 6, and I really wanted to explain to them and teach them about Black history in a fun and creative way. So I was looking for kids' books, and I really could not find very many kids' books out there. So I decided to go on my own personal journey and develop a kids' book that focuses on Black history and how we can overcome racial inequality and build a more equal world for everyone. So that's a little bit about me. So I'm also working on a couple different projects too. So I have a podcast that I've been working on all year, me and a friend, and we really wanted to kind of juxtapose what's going on in the society and if we can give people a different perspective. And I really think that perspective is the key when we're talking about race, because if you can see it from somebody else's perspective, then hopefully they can see it from your perspective. And if they can see it from your perspective, then there's a lot better chance of somebody engaging with you in a mutual beneficial conversation that will help other people change their minds and just change their perspectives. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple different projects that I have going on.
Let me pick up on that part right there, and I want to go back to the stress thing. It seems to me that, and as a psychologist, you're a good one to bounce this off of. The human dignity and the civility that's taken such a hit this year, as we move into this new year, hopefully we can work on that. But the theory that I wanted to explore with you a little bit from what you said about the podcast, et cetera, we are clearly in a position where human survival, humans just getting along, is not what we're intended to be. We're not even, shouldn't even be happy with human beings just thriving. It seems to me what we're shooting for is human flourishing. Human flourishing. How do all humans flourish to the best of their God-given potential and with all the skill sets we need to help them to get there? It seems to me there are two things required. The discipline required for dispassionate inquiry, the discipline of emotional self-expression and how we do that. But we have to learn those things. And we have to learn how to talk with and to each other and listen to each other and not take it personal, not get defensive, understand the issue versus the person, et cetera. How do you see us doing that in this coming year, particularly in such a divided environment where we're all still entrenched in our own commitments? We believe very deeply what we believe. And as I always say, we're all entitled to our own opinion, perspective, and viewpoint, but not our own facts. And people are really just standing firm and rigid and as they are. How do you see us bridging some of those gaps?
Yeah, I think a lot of that rigidity is simply due to the lack of experience. You know, in many cases, it comes because you don't understand that person's culture. You don't understand their history. And that means that you can't understand the perspective. So I think a lot of community outreach projects, ways to integrate different communities, get all the communities together, and to really build an experience that will allow people to see the world differently. Because even when you're talking about racism and, you know, the main tenets of racism, it really comes back to their experience is far different from our experience, from my experience as a person of color. They don't understand what it's like to walk down the street, you know, in darker skin. They don't understand what it's like to walk into a convenience store with darker skin, or what it's like to see the flashing lights behind you and wondering if it's going to be you this time. You know, and I think helping people understand that perspective can be accomplished by really integrating our cultures, our communities, to really start developing different projects or goals that integrate several different communities into one and really make it an achievable goal, make it something that we want to do as a city, as a species, that we want to have passion and compassion for people around us, that we want to see the perspective differently. And I think that's really where it comes down to the rigidity that you're talking about, is some people don't want to see somebody else's perspective. They're fine in their own perspective. I think that gets into a really big struggle, and there's a bunch of different things that we can discuss as to how you can break down that rigidity. But one of the best ways that I have uncovered is really spirituality. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I met through the Institute for Spirituality and Health, but one of the reasons that they brought me in is because of my research and my passion for understanding how spirituality plays in behavior. And this, I believe, is one of those areas where you can break down the rigidity simply by introducing them to a new spiritual experience, by giving them a spiritual experience that exceeds what they've experienced here on earth.
But doesn't behavior flow out of our understanding of how to be in alignment as human beings? Behavior to me is the end product of proper thinking, proper reflecting, and proper feelings. And to get to the behavior that we want. And what I see in the work that I do every day, that there's this disconnect, if you will, there's this gap. Human beings are out of alignment in what they say they think, what they reflect and meditate on about what they say they think, and therefore what feelings, emotions, and passions arise in them, and therefore what action and behaviors are they called to perform. And I think that we need to spend some time in helping people, to your point, do their own work around these racial issues, or these racial components, to do their own work so that they can get back in alignment in how they say they think, feel, and act. Because what I see is a lot of people saying one thing and doing something else. I hear a lot of great talk going on, but the actions and behaviors don't match the great talk. And so I think this distinction that needs to be made between the little phrase that I use to try to help and understand it from a spiritual perspective, aggressive to the issue and reconciliatory to the person involved in the issue. We have to get, and you know this as an African-American male, tall African-American male like myself, many times our passion is taken for anger. And as soon as they can put you in that box that you're just this angry black man, and not realize that you're passionate about these issues because your historical context in which you come out of, which all of us as people of color, and particularly African Americans, black, Negroes, coloreds come out of, is that you understand why we are the way we are and that we have to raise these issues as passionately as we can because the allies that we should have had all the while to help us raise those issues have not been present. And if we don't do it, it will not get raised. So I think you're really onto something about how spirituality, the way I defined it, spirituality is helping human beings stay in alignment. And I see so much disalignment right now. And I'll end on this way. The way I always describe it is just don't tell me you love me, just show me you love me. Use words only if necessary. All right? Because it's the behavior. It's all about the actions and the behaviors. And that's the piece that it keeps falling down.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the behavior. And a lot of that behavior does stem from their beliefs. And, you know, to meet them in a way, we kind of touched on that the other day, but meet them in a way that shows them that we're on the same side, that we're not all so different, that you can see it from my perspective when you really take the time to learn. But to get them to that point to want to learn, I think you're absolutely correct, that approaching it from a spiritual perspective and introducing it in a way where they can feel more spiritually fulfilled, I believe is a way that you can approach it to bring down some of that rigidity, you know, to soften them to our pain as African Americans, as our pain for Chinese Americans, and Hispanic Americans, and the whole spectrum.
And women too.
And women too.
Yeah. So here's the question then. So in this world of belief, because you used the word belief a minute ago, I think that's the crux of it. A belief in reason, the problem with belief right now, belief is or can be irrational.
Absolutely.
And what I see right now is so much, back to your word rigidity, so much rigidity in the belief of why they believe the way they believe. It is based on so many falsehoods, it is based on so many untruths, based on so many conspiracy theories, based on so much stuff. It is totally irrational, but you cannot get past the belief because it is so strongly based in stuff that would take you a long time to dispel and to try to help people understand. So I'm back to your word. All of this is really a moral and ethical discussion, is it not?
It absolutely is.
End of the day, it all boils down to morals and ethics.
Absolutely. If you feel comfortable with the state of the United States, despite people of color going to the streets all year in spite of the pandemic, if you still believe that they have no reason to be in the streets protesting, then, you know, it really does come down to what are your moral values? What do you see this being other than a moral issue, a human issue, a spiritual issue? And like you said, are you out of alignment? Are your thoughts and beliefs out of alignment with your spiritual connection, with your spiritual endeavors and your spiritual, you know, progress? Where are you going with your spirituality if it's not to help other humans?
So the question I posed to the Institute, and I posed throughout everything I've been doing toward the end of this 2020, hopefully getting ready for 2021 and creating that whole purpose. What is the fair and ethical treatment of all human beings? What is the fair, moral, and ethical treatment of all human beings? We've never wanted to have that discussion in this country as we the people, because it gets at we the people. It gets us away from I and me. It is our collective understanding of human beings being in a relationship to other human beings, and therefore what do all human beings need? What is the fair, moral, ethical treatment of human beings. Now, if I can get that question answered, or at least get some discussion about that baseline, what does that look like, just a baseline? I can then talk about the two antecedents, which is even harder to talk about. All human beings' lives matter. All human beings are equal. I can't have the discussion about the latter two until we get some agreement on the baseline of the premise question. And that's a question nobody wants to talk about, because then I have to be honest about the social, economic, political, and spiritual realities of where human beings are currently to be able to have that conversation. And so the work that I see is cut out for all of us is to be able to create pockets of nurtured safety where people can have these kind of dialogues, small groupings and larger groupings, and hopefully after COVID-19 and everybody gets vaccinated, we can go back to in-person stuff. But we got to develop the relationships first, because even if we create the crucible, the safe environment for these dialogues, if we don't have relationships with each other, it still ain't gonna matter. It's the trust.
Yeah.
So you spoke to me, you said something on the phone to me about that when we were talking, that we have to figure out what that vehicle looks like, acts like, moves like, talks like, quacks like, that will get people so excited. I can come in the room with my commitments. Yes, I want you in the room around the table with your commitments. Not trying to be anything into you or out of you, or even trying to convert you. I want to hear why you think the way you think. I want to hear why you feel the way you feel. I don't want to just listen. Notice I said I want to hear why you think the way you think and feel, because I want to see how you can help me and I can help you do something collectively for our common humanity going forward. That's, I think, is the challenge for 2021.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's a very poignant question to pose too, because if you can find out why people think this way, believe this way, then you and I can meet them there and, and kind of direct them to help see our perspective. But if we don't take the time, us as African Americans and of minorities, if we don't take the time to understand why they think this way,
right,
then how can we ever get to the point that we can resolve this to help them see our perspective as well? And I think a lot of it does come down to personal commitment. People tend to want the easy route, or they tend to want to, thoughts and prayers, and give thoughts and prayers, but thoughts and prayers don't fix a broken political system.
Right.
They don't fix 200 years of oppression and discrimination and racism and all of that we've taken to this point, that we've held on to. And, we were kind of talking about it the other day, but even when you think about it from a cultural perspective or a human perspective, as in passing on your genes, those slaves that were the ones that survived this, that survived those years in oppression, those were the people that had a certain kind of mentality, a certain kind of will that allowed them to survive despite losing their family, despite losing their children and wives, and maybe having that happen several times. So these are the people that were able to let go and move forward. They were the ones that were able to break off those relationships to be able to survive. And so I think a lot of that has also moved with us as those that were brave and courageous. They may not have survived all of the oppression of those times where, somebody could take your life in a moment's notice.
Well, fast forwarding again to the new year of 2021 that we're starting, you mentioned the word commitment. Commitment is easy. Accountability is hard. People will commit to you every day because they know most people are not going to hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the challenge for 2021 are the two words you hear: transparency and accountability. We have to hold each other accountable. And we have to let people understand going into the conversation and the dialogue there will be commitments that come out of this, and we're going to hold you accountable to those commitments. And the other two words I think that has to be in front of what we do in this kind of creating collective, in this new creative collective environment, are the words intentionality and mindfulness. Intentionality and mindfulness, which will get us to the spiritual part and to the spirituality, without even talking about it as spirituality, because that turns off some people right there. But if I can talk to you about intentionality and mindfulness and explain to you what those two terms mean and how they're connected together and work together in your life, then you have a chance of being able to take that step back and do some of your own work and your reflections that you need to do, and then figure out where you fit in as an I to the we's and where you want to fit going forward. Because this mentality of us and them can't carry on into 2021 and beyond. America's not going to have a future. Texas, Houston is not going to have a future. And we're in a world and a city that is becoming more and more people of color, in a broad sense of the word, people of color, and a city that is now a majority minority city. And as Dr. Stephen Kleinberg, our great friend at Rice University, reminds us, yes, we may be the fourth largest city, soon to be the third largest city in America, the most diverse city in America, yada, 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 yada. We're also the most segregated city in America and the most gated community city in America. So how we work on getting people together going forward is going to be very, very important. So we don't end up, and that's what COVID has done in a way, we don't end up going back into our silos. The silos of the solitude that so many people have experienced, to many that I talk to, has been a blessing. To others, it's a curse. The isolation and not being connected to other human beings dissimilar from themselves has been great. Other people miss that connection very deeply. It's all about distance and perspective going forward, silence and space. And some of this has been overwhelming, unfamiliar, unsought. Some of it's been a blessing. So as we come out of that, we're going to have to realize how both of these sides of people wanting to be with other human beings, again, some completely happy not to ever engage with the other, someone different than myself, someone that does not look like me, and are perfectly content to do so. So I think it's going to be a challenge there.
Yeah, there's absolutely going to be a challenge. I mean, it's been a challenge.
Anyway, now it's even worse.
Yeah, it's definitely, we're going to have to do some problem solving. And like you mentioned, we're going to have to really get community leaders together, and like you did for the task force on police reform, really work together to find mutual goals that we can provide to different cultures and communities and get them excited about it. You know, get them focused on something that will not just improve, people of color's lives, but improve everybody's lives.
Right.
Because isn't that really what we all want? We all want, our lives to improve. Nobody wants to go backwards.
No, and everybody wants something better for the next generation. Everybody wants something better for their kids. Everyone wants the same things for their children. The problem now in the second era of the resegregation of public education in Houston, that's becoming even more difficult. Yes, we know this time it's more along the lines of economic lines rather than racial lines, but the two crisscross each other where you can't tell the difference most of the time. So that's going to be a challenge. And so all these challenges, which are opportunities, challenges are just opportunities of how to get creative, innovative, how to get really smart about what we do and why we do it. Those two words again, with intentionality and mindfulness, with understanding the goal is to get to we and us and away from I and me. And a different is different, amen, period, not better than, not more than, not less than, just different, because we're all different human beings. All those things come into play so much now going forward, because demography is destiny. And it's proven very clearly that that's the rub. As we change demographically in this United States, Texas, and Houston, part of that rub comes from the changing diversity. And so with that diversity comes this: we have to move from tolerating each other, from tolerance to acceptance, tolerance to a big difference from being tolerated and being accepted as a human being, fellow human being. And we have to move away from this idea of diversity because we're locked into diversity, kumbaya, et cetera. We got to move from diversity to pluralism. And the difference between diversity and pluralism in a pluralistic society, in a pluralistic world, the human being counts just because they're a human being. Diversity, I still count how many of. Check off the box. Do we have the right blacks, the white Hispanics, the white women, etc.? No, I want to talk about human beings flourishing. That's the word. And so we have to make this shift as a mindset shift. And with that mind shift comes a heart shift. And with that heart shift comes a behavior shift. And so those are the things I think we're going to be looking forward to in 2021. Jeremiah, it's so great to have you. Let me ask you this closing question for you to ruminate on as we go forward for the new year of 2021. What is your number one aspirational goal going forward into 2021?
My number one aspirational goal is to really launch this kid's book and generate enough interest and really change the hearts and minds, beginning with children and people that have kids, giving them tools and different stories that can help them understand this perspective and can fuel our movement moving onward, so that everybody can be equal, that everybody can understand from different perspectives, and so that we all can be acceptance or have acceptance for each other.
I'm gonna give you just a second to expand on the acceptance part, because that's where it falls down, just quickly.
Yeah, acceptance being that we understand that we're different. We're all different in some ways, whether our race is included in that or not. And acceptance being that we see people for who they are and we're willing to meet them there, meet them as who they want to be, as who they describe themselves to be, and supporting them in that endeavor.
Good point. All right, thank you. We're going to have you on in some part later on in the new year of 2021, along with some of our colleagues from the Institute. I think we'll do a dialogue and a panel discussion on kind of where we're headed and should be headed, looking at this from, it is about humanities. That's the one word we haven't used yet today. It is about humanities and looking at how ethics, morals, and humanities play out in our lives every day. So thank you for that. I have some closing comments and then we'll be gone.
All right.
It is about adaptive servant leadership. It is about how we understand those three words together going forward: adaptive servant leaders. That's what we need. We need people who understand that we are talking about this junction, even that Jeremiah has been talking about, he and I, of health and spirituality. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And how do we work with people around topics that allows us to have the social, economic, political, and spiritual conversation all together, showing the interconnectedness, interdependency, and the relativeness of all of those together. And the intersectionality that happens when you understand how those all work and flow together, particularly in human beings' lives and challenging times that we're living in. That's going to be part of the great work going forward. The other thing I think we have to do for 2021 is clearly make a conscious effort to leave certain things in 2020. This thing about continuing trying to defend white supremacy, it is there, it exists. White privilege exists. This thing about empowering others to believe these wild conspiracy theories, we need to leave that behind. We need to leave this understanding of how we see immigrants as less than human beings, less than fully humans. African Americans, Blacks understand that. Negro colors understand that, because we were only marginal people in the Constitution. We never were listed as a full human being, only partial human being in the Constitution. We have to understand that these demonstrations and violence in the street that we see comes out of history, 400 years of history that has never been dealt with, because we've never dealt with slavery. We've never been willing to deal with slavery. We haven't had truth and reconciliation like South Africa has. The treatment of women is still something we need to really address going forward. This hostility toward human beings needs to be looked at deeply. The underlying problems that cause all this political stuff that have transformed, we know the genesis of it, but we also have hope now going forward. So the republic, democracy that we all greatly love, democracy and the republic needs our help. To live in a democratic society, looking at both my rights and privileges and my duties, obligations, responsibilities to each other must become paramount in what we do. Those are thoughts leading us into 2021. We have to go now, so we'll see you in the new year. Happy New Year, happy Kwanzaa. Until then, as always, be safe, stay well, and until then, peace, power, and love.